Here with me now, someone who's been trying to help Americans hit hard by this pandemic, Senator Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont. Senator, let me first start by asking you your assessment of the reality we are in at this moment. How do you see things right now?
Chris, it is important for us to take a very deep breath and to understand that we are in the worst moment in American history, maybe since the Civil War. You mentioned the official figure of 77,000 people dying of the virus. There are epidemiologists who estimate that that is significantly lower than reality, probably over 100,000. The number of 33 million people who have lost their jobs in the last 7 weeks probably understates that reality as well. Even more people have lost their jobs. So we are in a terrible, terrible moment. You know, I have a large email following. And we sent out an email to people and said, tell us what's happening in your lives in the midst of this pandemic. And Chris, what we received from people by the thousands was literally so painful, I couldn't read it. I mean, the stories are, I lost my mother, I lost my job, I have no money, I can't feed my kids. I don't know what to do. Mental illness taking place, enormous anxiety. People are hurting in a way we have never, ever seen in our lifetimes. And to top it all, we have somebody so irresponsible, so not understanding the current reality as President of the United States, that it is just incredibly painful.
There was some reporting today from the White House, which I thought was really quite striking. That the White House will not consider any further stimulus legislation this month as it eyes the economic impact from reopening U.S. states. That was according to economic advisor Larry Kudlow, talking to reporters on Friday, adding that formal talks with Congress have paused. I have increasingly heard from the White House and Republicans, like, we've done what we're going to do, and this is basically it, and good luck out there. What should we be doing, do you think?
Well, let me tell you something. That is an incredibly callous statement. I know many other senators and members of the House will fight like hell to make sure that we act as soon as possible, because the American people are hurting. You got 20% of the kids in this country who are hungry, people at their wits' ends, people are worried about being evicted, about losing their homes, can't pay their mortgages. We have got to act, and we've got to act soon, and we have got to act boldly. Now, some of the areas that I am working on is to get this country to do what Europe has done in many cases, and that is guarantee people their paycheck. I think that is the quickest, most efficient way of getting money into the hands of working people. It's called the Paycheck Security Act. We have, I think, 6 or 7 co-sponsors in the Senate. Pelosi is not unfavorably disposed to it, nor is Chuck Schumer. We're going to fight to make sure that is in the next bill. The other thing that I think we have got to do is, in the midst of this crisis, at least while we continue the fight for Medicare for all, in the midst of this crisis, we have got to make sure that every American can go to a doctor or go to the hospital whenever they need to without having to worry about picking up the cost. The other thing I think we have got to do is do what Canada is doing, and that is to understand that one $1,200 check that covers on average 1 month's rent in America ain't enough. We need $2,000 a month. Kamala Harris, Ed Markey, and I are working on that bill as well. And furthermore, I think it would be an economic disaster for this country if Trump succeeded in not funding the Postal Service and our post office went under. That would be a terrible thing for a variety of reasons. And the last point is we have got to make sure that in the richest country in the history of the world, people do not go hungry, and they are going hungry. So there's a lot of work to be done. We need action. We need action now. And what the American people have got to do, because they are with us on this issue, they know the pain. They're hurting. They got to tell Mitch McConnell, they got to tell Trump, we need action now, not in a few months.
You obviously you ran for president in the Democratic primary, and I think it's fair to say you saw the stakes of this election as extremely high, life or death, essentially, before the pandemic. But I wonder how you see it now. You have endorsed Joe Biden along with everyone else that ran in that race. Democrats have unified, I think, at that level. Like, how you are seeing this moment and the what it means to have this individual running the country at this moment and the need for change.
You know, all of the ugliness and inequities in American society, which, you know, many of us have understood for a long, long time, they're becoming visible to everybody in this country right now. And here is exactly why the stakes of this campaign are so high. This is what Trump believes. Trump essentially says, no, we know you're unemployed. We know you have no income. You know, you may get evicted from your home. You may not have food. We're going to give you a choice. Either you could starve and go into economic misery, or else you can go to work and get the virus. Those are the choices that you have. And of course, the people who are going to work now, those are poor people. Those are low income, working class people. Those are often women. They're often Black. They're often brown. And those are the people who disproportionately are getting sick. Those are the options that this president is giving people, which to my mind and to the minds of most Americans is unacceptable.
Senator Bernie Sanders coming to us tonight from Burlington, Vermont, his home. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.